The reaction in the beginning is normal, and if we resolve it, it stays there, but we keep carrying it around, and that is what creates the cycles of chronic stress in our lives. We get stuck in the stress response. And is equally true that sometimes the stressor remains there.
Expanding possibilities, the mindset zone.
I'm your host, Ana Milikian, and before we start, please remember to visit mindset.zone. Yes, instead of .com, it's .zone to access all the episodes and other amazing resources, all at mindset.zone. And if you want to get the free chapter of my book, Mindset Zone, please go to mindset.zone/book. This episode is a solo episode that is being sponsored by Magic Mind. Magic Mind is this matcha-based energy drink designed to crush procrastination, brain fog, and fatigue. I try it as a way of drinking less coffee in the morning, and I love it. I always have it in my refrigerator, and I usually drink it in the morning or the latest at lunchtime, and it's just like a shot. It's 2 ounces of this green drink that helps me get in the right mindset to be more productive and focused. And I totally recommend that you check them out at magicmind.co/mindset zone. You can get an initial discount if you use the coupon code MINDZONE20. I repeat, MINDZONE20, all caps. Just try it and tell me how it works for you. So, let's go to this episode, and I would like to start by reading a paragraph. Quote, just because you have dealt with a stressor doesn't mean you have dealt with the stress. And you don't have to wait until all your stressors are dealt with before you deal with your stress. Which is to say, you don't have to wait for the world to be better before you make your life better. And by making your life better, you make the world better. End quote. This is one of the premises of a thought-provoking book on burnout, and I would like to unpack some of the wisdom within this episode. Emily and Amelia Nagoski are the 2 sisters who authored this book. The book is Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. I repeat, Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. And in the first chapter, they make the point of the differentiating between stress and stressors. And this is really, really important. So I'm going to read how they do this differentiation. They write, quote, stressors are what activate the stress response in our body. End quote. I will repeat. Stressors are what activate the stress response in your body. And then they go on to define stress. Quote, stress is the neurological and physiological shift that happens in your body when you encounter one of these threats. End quote. So, we can see the stressor as the trigger or the stimulus, and the stress as our response to that trigger or stimulus. Let's go back to the first sentence that I read of that initial quote. Just because you have dealt with a stressor doesn't mean you have dealt with the stress. So think about this. So often in our lives, when something triggers our stress response, and then the thing that triggered the stress response is not there, the stressor is not there anymore, we still carry that stress response for the full day and beyond. So imagine the situation that you are crossing the street and a car is coming very fast. You have to jump. You almost were run over there, or an accident had happened. And instead of being relieved, you keep thinking about of what could have happened during your day. And you carry that, the stress response, you carry that, stay stuck there. All the activation that happen in your body to respond, you keep going and thinking of the different things that could happen or not happen. Or think about situations like I'm trying to think about situations that can happen in our day-to-day that activate the stress response. And if we don't let it go, it really can carry on with us, and can be something as mundane as, okay, you are parking your car and the parking lot is really busy and you're already late, and you finally see a spot and you are going to go, but somebody cuts you off and takes that parking lot, and you get all triggered with that situation, and you are going to finally finding a place, but you're already late, and you keep thinking about that all day. Okay, people should be more civic. I already saw the space. Maybe I should have been more assertive and had gone to the space. Whatever is the thing, but so easy that something triggers us and we take the response to that trigger all day long and beyond with us. And this really is what creates the challenges, because the reaction in the beginning is normal. And if we resolve it, it stay there, but we keep carrying it around. And that is what creates the cycles of chronic stress in our lives. We get stuck in the stress response. And it's equally true that sometimes the stressor remains there. And that takes us to the second part of the initial quote, that was beginning, you don't have to wait until all your stressors are dealt with before you deal with your stress, end quote. Because there are stresses that are there and they are very difficult to change. Think about life circumstances, like a job that at the moment is not the ideal job, but there are circumstances in your life that makes you be in that job. Or an illness in you or somebody close to you. You cannot just get rid of the stressor, the thing that is creating the stress, but you can still do something about how do you respond to those life circumstances that are creating that response in you. It's that separation of the stimulus and the response. And in the book that I really recommend, is an easy read, it's very well written, Burnout, The Secret of Unlocking the Stress Cycle. One of the points that they make is that the need that we have to complete our stress response, complete this stress cycle as a way of not staying stuck and not suffering the consequences of staying stuck in our stress that can lead to burnout. It's not the only reason for burnout. Like I spoke in the previous episode, burnout, there are many different ways of understanding burnout. And you can go to the previous episode, Understanding Burnout, a reflection for more about that. But let's focus here on this important differentiation. Because think about why this happened, because I think it is really important to understand. Usually we have this stress response because there was an evolutionary advantage. In other words, for our ancestors at some point, there was a way that saved their lives. So they survive and they transmit that to the next generation and so forth. And we traditionally give the example of, our ancestors somewhere in the Africa savannah, they were facing a lion, and then was important to have a response. So the lion was the stimulus, was the stressor. They saw the lion and they respond with all the body getting the energy necessary for running. And they run and they survive. So they use all the energy that was pumped in the body by the stressor. And they use that stress response in a way that saved their lives. And nowadays, the problem is that we have many things that trigger many stressors, many things that trigger our stress response, but then we don't have an effective way to use all the energy that is produced in our body. So one of the more effective ways to complete our cycle of stress and release from that response is through physical activity. Just like jumping up and down or the good old crying, that releases all that energy that we can then let it go. So the physical activity is where we use that energy that is created in the stress response is a way that tells our brain that we have successfully survived the situation and we are not dragging that all over around us for the day and even sometimes beyond the day. And even in the cases that is the second scenario, that the chronic stressors, we cannot easily get rid of some chronic stressors that are there. An unpleasant work environment, challenging life circumstances, that we still can use the same physiological kind of characteristics of using the energy to position ourselves in a better place, to have clarity, to see, because when we are in the stress response, we are really seeing in a narrow, it's like running away. We are in a narrow tunnel vision. And if we manage to use that energy and recognizing that the stressor is still there, we are able to see more possibilities and find maybe better ways, more effective ways, responses to deal with it. And that takes us to the last sentence of the initial paragraph. That is, you don't have to wait for the world to be a better before you make your life better. In other words, you don't have to wait for that chronic stressor to go away for you to start to do something different and feel better. And this brings me to one of my classic favorite principles that I keep referring in this podcast, in my talks, in my writings. That is, between the stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So the stimulus is the stressors. The response in this case can be our stress response. But if we see that space between the stressor and the response, we can choose something different than staying stuck on the stress response. And I always say that the challenge is to see that space. And one of the more effective ways that allow us to see the space is by pressing the pause button. We have to learn to almost stretch that space by pausing. And by practicing pausing, we are able to become more mentally fit to see that space and to choose our response. This is one of the principles that I use in my PIE method, P-I-E method, that starts, the P stands for pauses. We really have to learn, is one of the principles for taking advantage of any self-development, any high-performance methodologies out there, is starting with learning how to pause, increase our self-awareness, and embrace the experimentation. It's the P for pause, the I for increasing the self-awareness, E for embracing experimentation, because there is no failure, it's just more information to learn from. But let's here today just focus a little bit on the P for the pause. It's so important to learn to press that pause button that allows us to see that space between the stimulus and the response. And sometimes in the beginning, we really only can do this by looking backwards. So the situation already happened, we are still a little bit stressed, but we do a pause. Maybe we have a reflection moment at the end of the day. It's like I like to call the scheduled pauses, that we create the conditions, the container to stop and reflect on the day. We realize, we become self-aware that we are still in that stress response for something that happened maybe in the beginning of the day. Just bringing that awareness and that reflection, we can start to see the space that allow us to, okay, maybe I can do some physical exercise. Maybe I can go for a run or just jump for 5 minutes here, or use my energy, sing along or dance or something like that, that I'm using my energy in a way to use all that energy that the stress response created. And then maybe I can let it go if the stress, the stimulus is already finished, or if it's a stressor that is still there, maybe I can think about different ways of responding to it. So this creates more power of us to make a choice, and truly can empower us to be able to change our response to some of the systemic stressors out there, and even be able to find the resources in ourselves and around us to change the things that are creating the stressors and find more resources. So think about whenever you are in a stressful situation and you are feeling the stress, be aware of it and think, what is the stressor that trigger your stress response? If the stressor is already something in the past, okay, just finish the cycle, use that energy somehow, can be to physical exercise, and let it go. Or in the cases of chronic stressors that are still there, still use physical exercise on another way to work out that cycle of stress that allow us to be in a place that you can see more possibilities. Differentiate between the stressor and your stress response. One is the stimulus, one is the response. And if you are able to see the space in between, you start to be able to have the power of choosing your response. And this is the core of self-leadership and the core of your self-development. So with this, I always love to hear from you. Experiment with it and see how it works. And if you like books, Audible has the book, The Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. I will make sure that I will put the direct link for Audible and for Kindle and the regular book on the show notes. And if you want to experiment something new, please support our sponsor of this episode, Magic Mind, that, like I said, is 2 ounces green matcha, green tea base energy drink, really healthy, and is a way of, I'm using as a way of drinking less coffee in the morning and feel the energy to focus and do all the things that I have to do. You can try it going to magicmind.co/mindset zone. And for the initial order, if you want to try it, if you use the code is MINDZone20. So all caps, MINDZone20. You can have a nice discount to try it. And of course, you always can tell me how it works for you. With that, keep making a difference out there.
Expanding possibilities. The Mindset Zone.
Thank you for listening. And remember to visit mindset.zone. Yes, instead of .com, it's .zone. There you can find all the episodes and other amazing resources, all at mindset.zone. And if you want to get a free chapter of my book, Mindset Zone, please go to mindset.zone/book. As always, I'm so grateful you are here. Expand what's possible for you, for the ones around you, for the world.